This is regrettably part of the architecture of the human mind. That's why we have a degenerate like Mamdani being mayor of New York. Tell me you're going to give me everything for free, even though the accounting doesn't work. Tell me that you're going to rap in Arabic. Tell me that you've got a cute smile. I'm sold. I'm willing to buy in. You have Justin Trudeau, who's got roughly the intelligence of my socks. He'd never done anything in his entire life. Research shows that for such people, the more evidence that you show them that is contrary to their anchored position, the more they become anchored in their position.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
How is it that a nobody from the assembly in New York, from Uganda, is suddenly going to be the mayor of New York City? Has to be some pretty serious advertising. I'm from New York. I never heard of the guy before a few months ago, this Zohran Mamdani. We're going to talk about this guy and also the effective advertising on the human brain with the guy that I've been waiting a long time to interview, Dr. Gad Saad, professor, author, evolutionary behavioral scientist, also scholar at the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom at the University of Mississippi. Doctor, nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
I think that's the test study, right? This Zohran Mamdani guy just became a citizen 7 years ago. I never heard of him before. He was in the assembly in New York, which is the House of Representatives in New York, and never voted occasionally when he felt like it. Suddenly he's going to be the leader of the biggest city in this country. It's not him. It's the advertising, isn't it? It's got to be.
I mean, it is the advertising in the sense that, yes, he had a very, viral social media campaign,
right.
But it's also a reflection of the fact that most people, there's an expression in Arabic. Arabic is my mother tongue. The expression, when translated into English, is getting drunk by smelling the cork of the wine bottle, which basically refers to someone who has a weak constituency, right? They don't need to actually drink the wine to get drunk. They just take a little whiff and they're already drunk. So how do we apply that to what you're asking? Well, he's young. He has a smile, which, by the way, I've analyzed as being a total fraudulent, sadistic smile. But notwithstanding, most people look at that. He's young. He's energetic. He's a new guard. He smiles. Therefore, he must be good. Most people are cognitive misers, Joe, meaning that they are intellectually lazy. And so if you design a good viral campaign, most people will say, okay, sign me up.
84% of Gen Z women in New York City voted for this guy. You're right. Nice smile. I see some evil there, I'll be honest with you, but I'm not a young woman either. A nice smile. Oh, and look, he's eating rice with his fingers. That, I guess, applies to some. Oh, he's speaking Arabic. That applies to, he's rapping now. That applies to, he wants to free everybody from Rikers. That applies to somebody. So, Doctor, is it a matter of just blanketing everybody? Anything you want, anything you need, anything you desire, I'm going to bring it to you. Just vote for me.
Exactly. And so let me put it in psychological terms. So you're mentioning advertising. So in psychology of advertising, there is a framework, a theoretical framework known as the elaboration likelihood model. It basically says that when you're trying to convince people, persuade people, there are one of two routes of persuasion that you can invoke. There's what's called the peripheral route and the central route. The peripheral route works for cosmetic cues. So for example, if I'm trying to sell you perfume, I don't tell you, here are 18 reasons why physiologists at Harvard have said that this is the best perfume. Right. Rather, I show you a sexy girl on a horse with her hair flowing, and I just call it some exotic name, Mystère, and that will convince you. Because in this case, it's a hedonic product, so I only need to invoke your peripheral processing system. But if I'm trying to convince you to buy my mutual fund, that requires more cognitive effort. Yes. In that case, I will invoke your central route of persuasion. I will tell you, here are the 8 reasons why you should choose my mutual fund. Regrettably, Joe, even for consequential decisions, most people are a lot more likely to go through the peripheral route of persuasion because it is less effortful, right? As I said, most people are lazy, are cognitive misers. And so tell me you're going to give me everything for free, even though the accounting doesn't work. Tell me that you're going to rap in Arabic. Tell me that you've got a cute smile. I'm sold. I'm willing to buy in. And I'll give you a great example of that from Canada, where I originally hail from.
Right.
You have Justin Trudeau, who's got roughly the intelligence of my socks. He'd never done anything in his entire life, but he's tall. He has beautiful hair. He's young. So let's give him a shot. So in 2015, Canada elected him. Well, then he completely sent Canada into the abyss of infinite darkness. And Canadians said, here's a great idea. Let's elect him a second time. He doubled down on sending us into the abyss of infinite lunacy. And so he said, here's a great idea. Let's elect him a third time. So This is regrettably part of the architecture of the human mind. That's why we have a degenerate like Mamdani being mayor of New York.
The book is called The Parasitic Mind. That is out now. You've got another book coming up in the spring. Do we want to say the title of that now too?
Let's do it. It's called Suicidal Empathy. And if you want, I can tell you how these two books explain all of the lunacy that your listeners and readers and viewers have been seeing. You ready?
Let's do that in a minute. I want to finish on Mamdani. You just called him a degenerate. The guy came here. I guess this is what I want to know from you, because I'm born and raised here. I don't take it for granted, though. A lot of Americans take it for granted. I don't. I worked very hard from 12 years old to be where I am. My children are working very hard to be successes as well. But those who come here from the outside are coming here for a better life. Can you explain to me in my very simple mind, I think I've got more IQ than your socks, maybe not much, but can you explain to me why somebody would come here from Uganda, a horrible place, and see the opportunity of New York or see the opportunity of the United States of America and then decide to try to change it like where you came from? It's the same thing with Ilhan Omar. Why would you want to make it all about Somalia as you're representing a district in Minnesota in a country that welcomed you with open arms? What is that?
What do Ilhan Omar and Mamdani have in common?
Well, they're both immigrants from horrible places.
And what's their religion?
Oh, they're both Muslim, yes.
Right. So Islam is a conquering religion. Therefore, please, let me in. But once we become mighty, then we show no pity on you, right? So when we are in the minority, we play victim. I just want your freedoms. I just want to be like you. Please, let me in. Once we exceed that tipping point, then things change. Why is that? Because it is codified in Islam that the entire world will be at peace once it is fully united under the universal flag of Allah. So these folks are, and of course it doesn't apply to every Muslim,
right.
And of course there are millions of Muslims that are perfectly lovely, but both the two examples that you gave stem from the reflex that the fact that we come from terrible countries, that's probably because they didn't practice Islam properly there. Once we come to the United States, inshallah, we'll turn it into the real Islamic nirvana that we were promised by Allah. So on the other hand, you have other immigrants, some of whom are actually of an Islamic background. Take, for example, Ayan Hirsi Ali, who has lived the horrors of what it is to be a woman raised in an Islamic society. And she is the one who is standing on top of the mountain warning the West that don't take our freedoms for granted, as I am. So you have two types of immigrants. You have the ones that have sampled from the buffet of hellish societies, come to the West and are perfectly grateful to be here and therefore defend the freedoms of the West. And you've got the folks like Mamdani that do the exact opposite.
Well, I guess what I'm confused about is Mamdani, I understand. He's a man. And in that religion, if you're a man, you get everything. But if you're Ilhan Omar, and you're now worth $30 million, and you came here from Somalia by way of Sudan, you had no rights. You were treated like dirt. You married your brother to come here, to let him come here as an immigrant. How is it that she doesn't see the light? That she's now wealthy, she's now free, she's now liberated, and yet she's still spewing the biggest hate against Jews, against the American way of life, against capitalism, against Charlie Kirk. How is it that she hasn't been awakened to, holy mackerel, this is so much better than where I come from?
Hashtag Queers for Palestine. It's
right,
the
exactly.
Mechanism that explains that hashtag, that explains Ilhan. That's why the Parasitic Mind was the global success that it was. That's why, inshallah, Suicidal Empathy will be equally, if not more successful, because what happens to those folks is that they are parasitized. And here, if you'll forgive me for now entering that territory of my books.
No, absolutely.
Thank you. The reason why I use the neuroparasitological framework, and I know it's a mouthful, so let me explain what it is.
Please.
If you take the wood cricket, an actual wood cricket, which is an insect that abhors water, it wants nothing to do with water. So evolutionarily speaking, it doesn't want to swim. When it is parasitized by a hairworm, that goes into its brain, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump into water in order for it to complete its reproductive cycle. So it hijacks the wood cricket's brain, causing it to merrily and happily commit suicide in the service of the brainworm that has zombified its brain. So I took that mechanism and I argued that human beings, both their cognitive system and their emotional systems, can be parasitized by ideological brainworms. So that's what's happened to Ilhan Omar. She is the wood cricket who merrily jumps into the water, committing suicide in the service, in this case, of her foundational identity, which is that she is a Muslim. There you go.
Can people, that was amazing. It's Gad Saad, by the way, Dr. Gad Saad. Go to GADSAAD.com. Of course, scholar at the Declaration of Independence Center for Study of American Freedom, University of Mississippi, and also professor, author. He's got that great book, The Parasitic Mind. When we see people who are filled with parasites, can we deworm them? Can we unprogram them? Can we deprogram them? Is that, and I'm guessing we can. So let me jump to the next part of the question. Why does it take so much longer to deprogram them than it takes for them to fall for the flowing hair on the horseback to buy this perfume? Why is it so much harder?
That's a great question. So there are two parts to this question. One is optimistic. The other one is pessimistic.
Right.
The optimistic part, to your point, is that yes, most people can be dewormed, and that there are mind vaccines that you could administer to people that can eventually make them see the light. So that's the optimistic angle. Here's the pessimistic part. There's always going to be a group of people that are going to go, la, 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 I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to get the mind vaccine administered to me, right? And so those people, you have to learn to potentially give them up. In other words, my time is very limited. I'd like to, vaccinate everyone against this imbecility,
right,
but I have to be able to know whether Joe is prone to being vaccinated or not. Now, here's another pessimistic part. And again, I'm going to now plug a book that's not mine. And I always joke that I should be getting some of their book royalties, the number of times that I have plugged their book. So there's a book by two French psychologists called Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber. They wrote a book called The Enigma of Reason, where they argued, they're evolutionary psychologists, they argued that our capacity to reason and hence to seek truth did not evolve to seek some objective truth, but rather to win arguments. So you could see how that's pessimistic, right? This is why most people who suffer from TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, It doesn't matter how much evidence I give them that might hopefully get them to at least reduce their TDS. They're going to go, la, 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 I don't want to hear it because I am on anti-Trump camp, and no amount of evidence that you could ever offer me is going to move me 1 millimeter off my anchored position. As a matter of fact, research shows that for such people, the more evidence that you show them that is contrary to their anchored position, the more they become anchored in their position. So there's both optimistic and pessimistic parts to your question.
But how is that not insane? Because if I give you the evidence and spell it out, I mean, that literally sounds like it's insanity, but these people are functioning in the same society as you and me. So how is that? If that's not insanity, what is?
Well, it is. This is why the neuroparasitological framework is so powerful, right? Because their brains have been hijacked, right? Your question presupposes that my prefrontal cortex is still working using a set of axioms of rational thought.
Yes, I make that assumption. Yeah.
Exactly. Now think about it. Remember the surgeon who, by the way, he won the Nobel Prize for this, to the Nobel Prize Committee, great shame. The guy who came up with the lobotomy thought that he was doing a good job, right? Let's drill a hole into your lobe, scramble the whole thing, and hopefully some of your psychiatric conditions will hopefully subside. Well, I mean, yes, they subsided, but I've basically metaphorically decapitated you, right? I mean, one of the great ways for me to no longer suffer from migraines is to decapitate my head, and then here you go, my migraines have been resolved. That's right. This is why the neuroparasitological analogy is so powerful, because there is no way to make sense of what they're doing. Their brains have been literally hijacked by ideological capture.
The Parasitic Mind is the book that's out now. The new book is going to be out in the spring called Suicidal Empathy. It is Dr. Gad Saad. Let me bring up the Palestinian children, if I can. And I had an interview with Alan Dershowitz, and I talked to Dr. Dershowitz or Professor Dershowitz about what about the children? When they graduate from elementary school, you and I both know their graduation ceremony is killing a Jew. I mean, that's what it is. They're raised to hate the people because they're told to hate the people. And once they become, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, can carry a gun, they carry a gun, they throw rocks, they shoot at, they do whatever they can to kill a Jew. How do you change that? Okay, Hamas is going to be out. Hopefully, I think it's going to be out. And maybe Egypt and Jordan and the surrounding areas all go in and make Gaza something great. I think that would be wonderful. But what about the children who grew up knowing that the Jews are the mongrels behind the trees and behind the rocks and they should die? And if you kill them, that's a good thing. Allah will be very happy with you. How do we change a mindset that, like, I was brought up to believe that the sky is blue? If somebody tried to convince me that it's not blue, it is, by the way, but what if it weren't? I wouldn't really fall for it very easily. How do you tell somebody who was brought up with an inherent enemy that it's not your enemy anymore?
Great question. And let me start off by drawing again. Analogical reasoning is a very powerful tool to demonstrate certain phenomena to people. So let's draw an analogy. When I teach a consumer psychology course, and at one point in the semester, we talk about the ethics, the legality, and the morality of targeting advertising to children, one of the mechanisms that you use in deciding when it should be okay to target children is the following. When children realize that the advertising that's targeting them is trying to persuade them to do something. So at 5 years old, they don't have the cognitive defenses to be able to understand that, right? But at 12 or 13 years old, they're able to. So now imagine this. We could have a legal, moral, and ethical system that bans the targeting of advertising, selling chewing gum to children. But now I'm going to come to your point.
Right.
But straight out of the womb, to hundreds of millions of children in Islamic societies, the first thing that I teach them all day long, straight out of the womb, is Jews are evil, Jews are demonic, Jews are rats, Jews try to kill our prophet. Every single calamity that the world has, that you will face in your life, is due to the Jews. This is why, by the way, Joe, I coined the game 6 Degrees of Jew on the play of, you've heard of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
I've never heard of this 6 Degrees of Jew. I've never heard of that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's the game that I coined. So 6 Degrees of Jew works as follows. You ready? I give you a calamity, and you have up to 6 illusory causal steps for you to blame it on the Jews. So, for example, let's try it out. An Amazonian frog just died in the Peruvian Amazon. Blame the Jews, go. And so the point of the game is that you've got up to 6 links to always converge on it being the Jew. So to your point, you're exactly right that the Israel-Palestine conflict has zero to do, not 1%, zero to do with land. What it has to do is with the fact that Jews exist on that land is an existential affront to the foundational canonical tenets of Islam. Muhammad on his deathbed said, promise me that you will rid Arabia of certainly Christians, but please promise me of the Jews. So there's those children who have absolutely no means of erecting cognitive defenses against the hate that they're taught will eventually, guess what? Hate the Jews. By the way, for your listeners who don't know this, I grew up in Lebanon. Arabic is my mother tongue. So it's not as though I don't have the experience. It's not as though I haven't spoken to people in Arabic. I mean, literally, you could say to someone, hi, Ahmed, how are you doing? Within 2 or 3 salutations, we will converge on goddamn Jews, let's kill them.
Wow.
If you eradicate that, and again, of course, it doesn't mean that every Muslim hates Jews. And of course, I've known millions of Muslims that have been perfectly lovely and kind and who are my friends. But does Islam promote coexistence with the Jews? Absolutely not.
It is. It's very interesting because I don't want them to die. Obviously, I want the children to grow up and have great lives. But if you're born into that, what is the process psychologically of saying, okay, I know you believe it, but I'm going to tell you some stuff that maybe is going to make you unbelieve it. Again, when you're brought up to think they are the enemy, the inherent enemy of your life, your family, your God, your everything, how do you undo that? Because again, you keep saying it. It's not just a disclaimer. I've got very good friends that are Muslim that wouldn't hurt a fly. I've got people that are family members that have converted. I'm Christian. They decided that Islam was for them. Don't know why. Don't care. But I love them, and I don't think they'd kill me either. But they're not raising children in what would be Palestine. They're not raising children in the Gaza Strip that really believe that their existential threat on this planet is the people that live over there. Can you undo that?
There are several ways that you could try to do it. Although, again, I'm quite pessimistic about the likelihood of this happening.
Right.
So, if we wanna couch the solution within the canons of Islam, the only way that it could be done is as follows. And again, I don't think that this is possible. Let me step back to give you a bit of an explanation of the doctrines of Islam. In Islam, you have what's called the Meccan period and the Medinan period. Muhammad started his proselytizing in Mecca, and then after many years with very few adherents, he moved to Medina. Now, in the Meccan period, when he had very, very few followers, his message was actually quite tolerant and peaceful. You have your religion, I have mine. When he moved to Medina and his message, his marketing changed for it to become a lot more violent, then a lot more people said, yeah, sign me up. We can go get the hot Jewish girls. Sign me up for this little adventure, right? And so how could it be that God in one part of the Quran says, tolerant things, and then in later parts, he says intolerant things? These two things contradict each other. This is where you have the Islamic concept of abrogation. Abrogation means that when you have two statements that are perfectly contradictory, the later statement abrogates the earlier one, because God, in his infinite wisdom, has the right to change his mind, right? So what you would need, if I'm going to couch the solution in a canonical answer, you would need to magically find a magic wand that now, using a blanket statement, abrogates all of the violent passages that says, there used to be a period where killed the Jew and killed the kuffar and killed the infidel made sense. Now we've abrogated all this. And this has to be internalized within the doctrines of the religion for you to even have a shot at changing it. Now, here's the problem, and this is why it's very pessimistic. Islam states from the get-go that it is the final, perfect, inerrant word of God. Every letter is the perfect word of God. Therefore, unlike other Abrahamic religions that have had the magic wand of reformation to alter them, Islam is not as prone to reformation precisely for those reasons. It's not as though in the 1400 years of Islam's history, even people within its own faith have not tried to reform it, but they've always miserably failed because it doesn't tolerate reformation. So that's why it might be an intractable problem. And this is why I tell people that demography is destiny. Beware of the type of immigration program that you have in the West, because it will down the line harm you.
The book is called The Parasitic Mind. Also get the new book coming out in the spring. It is called Suicidal Empathy. It's Dr. Gad Saad. Go to GADSAAD.com. I'm glad you brought up the rules or law of abrogation, because I always believed that in Islam it was peaceful first and then abrogated to being very violent, and then the Hadith comes in and Taqiyya comes in and all this other stuff. I thought it was the other way around. Are you saying that it started out violent, then it abrogated to being more peaceful? It is what I thought.
Exactly right. It started in the Meccan period. It started out peaceful. You have your religion, I have mine. Kumbaya, let's all hug it out. Yes. Later in the Medina period, it became more violent. So you're exactly right.
So the peaceful Muslims that I know, and I know somebody right from Egypt. I think she's great. She is a Muslim, and she follows, I believe, the early Islam. Is that what people are doing when they are peaceful, when they don't want to overtake everything? Those who are, your religion is yours and my religion is mine? I mean, she really appears to believe that.
No, they're basically decent people, right? We're all born through the random combination of the genes of our parents. We are born all short, green eyes, brown eyes, hardworking, lazy, right? There is inherent heterogeneity in individual differences, right? So just like there are tons of really nice Jews and tons of really nasty Jews, that holds true for any group, correct? So the friend of yours is born a decent person, lives her life with dignity and peace,
right,
despite the teachings of her religion. Let me draw another analogy for you.
Okay.
I am very much wedded to my Jewish identity. I'm not particularly religious.
Right.
And part of not being religious is that when I go to a Chinese restaurant, I do eat calamar and I do eat shrimps, despite the fact that kosher laws forbid the eating of that. I'm not practicing a gentle form of Judaism. There's only Judaism. I choose to, in a classic buffet cafeteria style, I choose those parts that I wish to adhere to, and I don't pay attention to the parts that I don't. And pretty much every person on earth does exactly that, except the really what we call extremist Muslims, who are the ones who are being most faithful to their religion.
But you and I would agree, Doctor, that all Italians are good, right?
All Italians are good, but here's the problem. Are you ready? All Italians are wannabe Lebanese, so you got that wrong.
I did not realize that. That's an education I got today. And we won't mention the crime families in New York about Italians. It's Dr. Gad Saad. You mentioned demography. And I think that's really, really interesting because there is a push in this country to change our demography. Like that somehow makes us better, more peaceful, more accepting, more tolerant, more DEI. And obviously, when you divide and conquer, you're literally dividing and conquering. Obama was the king of this. And then on steroids, Biden administration did it. It wasn't Biden, probably Obama in his third term. But they did everything they could to divide this country. It's worked in very, very blue cities. It's worked even here in Texas, where I live, where all the big cities are now very blue. And we see videos of people, white women and men, getting on their hands and knees and kissing the boots of black people somehow to make up for this, I guess, born guilt we should have about slavery from 400 years ago. What do you make of all that? If we allow this country to be divided like that, the country will no longer exist. It'll be whatever the far left or Soros or whoever wants it to be. They're doing it through demography, right?
Indeed. So there are two words that explain this. It happens to be the title of my next book, Suicidal Empathy. It explains every single malady at the domestic and foreign level that has gripped the West into a death spiral stems from this dysregulated form of empathy. And let me step back and explain the theoretical framework.
Please.
Okay? Empathy, when properly modulated, is a perfectly adaptive virtue to possess. We expect a social species like human beings to have empathy. For you and I to have a meaningful conversation, I need to put myself in your mind to kind of get a sense of what you expect from me, what you might know or not know. And this is, by the way, called theory of mind. One of the ways that we can identify autistic children, well, the main way by which we can identify children as being autistic is we give them a theory of mind test, which they invariably fail. There is no blood test to check for autism. Okay. So empathy is an indelible part of our human nature. So no one is arguing that empathy is a bad thing. It makes us human to be empathetic. But like so many psychiatric disorders, the problem arises when that otherwise adaptive mechanism becomes maladaptive. It misfires, right? So let me give you an example, and then I'll come back to empathy.
Please.
OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is a psychiatric condition that's very debilitating, but it originates from an adaptive process. So for example, if I had the pleasure of meeting you one day in person, and if you came up to me and I noticed that immediately before you were to shake my hand, I noticed that you sneezed a few times into your hand, right, and I shake your hand, I say to myself, oops, this looks like Joe has a bad cold. Let me go quietly to the bathroom and wash my hands because I don't want to pick up his cold. Therefore, right, scanning the environment for potential threats makes perfect evolutionary sense. The problem arises when that adaptive mechanism hyperfires. Now, if I spent 8 hours a day washing my hands and scalding hot water so that my skin is falling off and I can't get to work because I'm stuck in the bathroom washing my hands, I now suffer from germ contamination fear, a form of OCD, and it misfires. So what started off adaptive became maladaptive. The exact same thing happens with empathy. Good empathy, adaptive empathy is great. Maladaptive empathy is where we say all immigrants are equally likely to assimilate, because I'm not a bigot and a racist. So for me to say that people from Yemen are less likely to assimilate than people from Denmark seems icky, seems gauche. Therefore, better for me to be an empathetic ostrich and pretend that those realities don't exist, because I could admire myself in the reflection of the mirror and show that I am a moral, preening person, right? And so suicidal empathy explains the judicial system. It's not fair to put this lovely black guy in prison for life. He's only committed 182 previous felonies. Right. Don't you think he's deserving of a second chance? And by second chance, I mean 183rd chance. Don't you think that in the white supremacist society that we live in, he's a victim? So if he is now becoming a felon, it's due to what happened 300 years ago somewhere in the southern United States. So shouldn't you then not double punish him by putting him in prison? Shouldn't you be more empathetic, asshole? And so you take both all domestic policies and all foreign policies, create a lobotomy to your empathy system, and you end up where we are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just loved what you just said, because when you were talking about Sweden, I thought of the video out of Finland. There was somebody who I believe was an immigrant from Yemen or Somalia standing in front of a camera in Finland saying the problem with Finland is there are too many Finnish people here. I mean, literally, that's what she said, and she meant it. And the people in Finland are going, we have to accept them all. They're exactly like us. It doesn't matter where they're from. They're just going to assimilate, and they don't. That's why you see an 83% increase in sex crimes in the Nordic countries. When it comes to our judicial system here, I'm so glad, and it's Dr. Gad Saad. Go to gadsaad.com. Go get his book called The Parasitic Mind. The new book comes out in the spring called Suicidal Empathy. What jumped out at me is cashless bail. Well, he didn't have a father. What about slavery? What about white supremacy? What about institutional, slavery or racism, whatever it happens to be? We'll give 18 different excuses for why the guy shouldn't have to put up some money for bail before he gets out. Then he gets out and does it again. And then they ask, well, why did he do it again? That's so weird. Deterrents really do work. And if we really are going to have a blind justice system, we have to stop considering even 100 years ago. Don't we? We should just consider this guy did this thing, should face this punishment. If we get back to that, we'll be better, won't we?
Oh, of course. This is all about internal versus external locus of control. So there's a psychologist in the 60s who developed this brilliant dichotomy in understanding how we attribute causality to our lives. An internal locus of control basically says that things happen to me because of my internal attribution. So I did well on the exam because I'm smart or because I studied. External locus of control would be things happen to me because of fate, because of God, because of white supremacy, right? Now, here's the reality. Most people have the following attributional style. They attribute successes internally and they attribute failures externally. So I did well on the exam because I'm very smart. I did very poorly on the exam because Professor Saad is a mean Jewish asshole. So, and that basically protects my ego, right? Because if all successes are due to me and all failures are due to the outside world, then that's great. Then I can walk tall and proud. And this is what happens with the progressives. They attribute all the failures of noble people of color and noble Muslims and so on, all of their failures. They no longer have personal agency, those people. Everything that they do that's bad stems from external forces. And who's to blame for those external forces? It's the racist, transphobic, Islamophobic, slavery-inducing society of the United States. So surely we have to break the link between cause and effect and not put them in prison. That's why it's parasitic. That's why it is suicidal empathy. Because, I mean, Isaac Newton explained to us, for every action, there is a reaction, right? The most fundamental law of nature is a cause and effect relationship. Once we break that, then we are completely nihilistic, right? I mean, how many times do you have to, imagine if you're a cop, you spend your days taking chances with your life to arrest someone. 15 seconds after they're arrested, they're let out on the street, cashless bail, and we'll do that for 183 times. Who wants to sign up to be a cop under those circumstances? Not me.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It's Dr. Gad Saad, but you bring up more questions. And thanks for all the time today. Hey, make sure you go get his book called The Parasitic Mind. Go to his website, gadsaad.com. When I watch, if you had a group of people that you were giving a seminar to, and you said to that group of people, could be 1,000 people, who in here wants more crime? Nobody raised their hands. Who in here wants less crime? They'd all raise their hands. Doesn't matter what their background is, doesn't matter what their thoughts are, or their overwhelming or underwhelming empathy happens to be. We all want less crime. Doctor, why do they elect Alvin Bragg? They know that means more crime and more people out. Why do they elect Zohran Mamdani when they know he wants to free everybody from Rikers? They all want less crime. I think you would agree that nobody would say, I'd like a little more crime. Nobody's going to say that. So why can't they balance the two and realize this action is causing this reaction?
Because in the hierarchy of needs, if you are a rational human being that's not parasitized both by parasitic ideas and by suicidal empathy, your position is correct, right? Every person should want less crime more than more crime. But if it means that my being an ally to a person of color will result in more crime, so be it. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Of course, Queers for Palestine is exactly that, right? Because if my identity is defined by my queerness, more power to you. Be as queer as you want to be. Let's celebrate you. But on the other hand, if that is your fundamental identity marker, then should you be celebrating Tel Aviv, which is one of the most queer-friendly societies in the world? I mean, short of Montreal, short of San Francisco, short of New York, you'd be hard-pressed to find a city that is more queer-friendly than Tel Aviv. Or should you put all of your eggs behind the following basket in Gaza, where they have found an incredibly effective 100% gravity-based conversion therapy program. We take you to the highest building and we launch you off so that your head splatters when you fall down, which is, by the way, an Islamic edict. So not surprisingly, many of the people who have blue hair and get their degrees at Oberlin College will end up saying #Queers for Palestine. Why is that? Because it is more important for me to exhibit suicidal empathy as the ultimate signal of my virtue than to actually survive. That is why it is suicidal empathy.
100% conversion therapy, positivity. It works every single time, throwing them off the building. So let me take it to the next step. Nobody but nobody who's ever said they're an ally of anybody has ever been free of the crime from those people they're allied with. Period. End of story. You can say, I am 100% an ally and I'm kissing the toes of this black person in the town square. They're not now protected from being hijacked or carjacked somewhere in D.C. They're not. You're not do they think they're getting a benefit or a payoff? Like I remember the people in Philadelphia. I think it was Philadelphia. Correct me if I'm wrong. You might not know. But some guy has a Black Lives Matter flag outside of his house, and there are people outside rioting who are busting into his house and stealing his stuff. And he goes, no, I'm on your side. What are you doing? I've got the Black Lives Matter flag. I mean, you see what I mean? The ally is not getting what the ally thinks they're getting by being allies.
Exactly. So this is a form of selling indulgences, right? Okay. You remember in the Catholic, this led, by the way, to the Reformation of Martin Luther, right?
Right.
Selling indulgences basically said, look, if you give me this amount of money, then you are buying your potential right to heaven and so on. You're selling indulgences. So when I put that proud #BLM flag up, I am selling indulgences that hopefully say, look, let me into your crowd. Don't vandalize my home. But by the way, Joe, I have much more shocking examples than your
Go ahead.
#BLM.
Yeah.
There's a woman in 2010, I believe. She is fully quoted and cited in my forthcoming book. She's a white woman, very progressive woman who has dedicated her life to demonstrating that it is disgusting how the white supremacist world has created an archetype of violent black men, because Black men inherently are all incredibly peaceful and kind. Now, she had gone to Haiti to stand arm in arm with her black men brothers. And it turns out that one of them took her up to a rooftop and raped her violently all night. And as he was raping her, she begged him and said, "Why are you doing this when I'm your ally? Do you not realize that I am a black Malcolm X scholar?" Can you believe it, Joe, that he kept raping her after she told him that she's a Malcolm X ally? So when you have someone that is this parasitized, how can you move forward, right? So it's not just about putting hashtag BLM. This woman thought that a black man would not rape her once she shared the fact that he's a Malcolm X scholar. Here's one more quick example.
Please.
Norwegian man, indigenous Norwegian, meaning a white Norwegian guy, was sodomized in 2013 by a Somali immigrant. Okay, after the sodomizer served a very small sentence, maybe 3 years or something, because the Norwegians are much kinder. They don't believe in punishing people. Why don't we give him opportunities to self-actualize as per Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So after he served a very, very small prison sentence, he was going to be deported. The guy who was sodomized by the Somali guy came out and said that he felt horrible. He was racked with existential angst. Why? Because if that poor, noble Somali immigrant is sent to Mogadishu, he will not be able to maximally flourish to his full potential. Well, I'm here to tell you, as a evolutionary psychologist, that our emotional system did not evolve to empathize with our sodomizers.
No, without a doubt. I mean, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. I mean, the Haiti story was pretty gross too. But the fact that the guy wanted him to have more opportunities to stay there and possibly sodomize some more dudes makes me crazy, because that guy can't be fixed. It reminds me of a story, and I don't know the names involved, but there was a attempted suicide bomber who was a female that the suicide bomb didn't go off, or it didn't do what it was supposed to do, and she was caught in Israel. She was injured in the attempted bombing, and again, I don't know the specifics of it, other than they brought her back, they saved her life, they gave her a future, and you would figure that she would be very, very happy with them. And when interviewed, she said, "My only regret is that the suicide bomb didn't work, that it didn't kill a bunch of Jews." And that, to me, shows I'm a glass half full guy. Doc, I am. That shows me the glass is half empty, because I don't know how you fix people like that Norwegian guy. I don't know how you fix people like that woman who's in the middle of being raped, thought that her ally or ally-ness, whatever it was, or allegiance, somehow would benefit her when it didn't. And this woman who only has life because the best doctors in Israel saved her life, wishes she could have killed them. So last question, and thank you for all the time. This is an amazing interview. I hope you'll come back again. Last question has to be, can they be fixed? Please say yes.
And they is who? Who's they?
Well, they are the ones who are in this suicidal empathy, sensibility, that they will die before giving up their allegiance.
They can, but as I said, the question is, to those who cannot be saved, could they be sufficiently restrained that the rest of us don't bear a huge cost? So let me end it on a positive note,
please,
on an optimistic note, okay? I had a friend, a Jewish friend, who in 2000, and I actually discussed this case in the Parasitic Mind, who in 2010 reached out to me and said, "Hey, Gad, I know that you're from the Middle East. Arabic is your mother tongue. You understand Islam really well. Could you tell me whether Islam preaches violence or peace towards the Jews? Because I'm friends with this PhD student in Islamic studies, and she's perfectly peaceful and kind, and she would never hurt a fly." All the stuff that we've talked about earlier, Joe.
Yes.
And so what I did is I took a montage, an amalgamation of a bunch of clips. It was about 22 minutes long. That was of a whole bunch of different imams spanning the globe, and what were the things that they were saying about the Jews. Okay. And that montage is so extreme that if Hitler were listening to it, he would say the following: "Hey guys, look, I'm Hitler, so believe me, I hate the Jews and I want to kill them all. But can you tone down the anti-Semitism? It seems like it's a bit too high."
Come on.
So now I shared this clip with her without any editorializing. So I didn't say, I didn't give my position. I said, here is hopefully something that could answer for you. Now, these are Islamic scholars. These are imams. So certainly they understand what Islam is and what it says about the Jews. You know what her response was, Joe? But don't worry, I will end it on a positive note. You know what her original response was? It hurts me to see that you are no different in your extremism than they are. So my sharing a clip of them wanting to genocide every single Jew on earth was equally extremist as them wanting to genocide me. Okay?
Stunning.
Now, it took her 14 years. But in 2024, out of the blue, I had unfriended this idiot. I received an email from her out of the blue saying, "Dear Gad, it's been many years since we last spoke, and I just wanted to apologize for how I reacted to you 14 years ago. Boy, were you right, and boy, do I see it." Now, why is this? Why is this an optimistic end to our conversation? Because it did take her 14 years, and the world might end before 14 years. But what I'm saying is even the most degenerate imbeciles can come around. The question is whether we can afford the time that is needed for them to come around. But yes, we can flip people.
Listen, I love this conversation. I hope that you'll come back again. It's Dr. Gad Saad, professor, author, and evolutionary behavioral scientist. He's also a scholar of the Declaration of Independence Center for Study of American Freedom at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. GadSaad.com. Go there. Get his book right now called The Parasitic Mind. The new one is coming out in the spring, Suicidal Empathy. Thank you so much for all this time, and what a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Cheers.
All right, my man. Another episode of Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags to come soon. Make sure you subscribe. Stay right here.